some of that even, I think, before those changes came up upstream. But I think now that that's actually been formalized, kind of finalized, we should make sure that, we're doing a similar or close a similar thing if we can.
Yeah, I think it's a new NIF interface. Is how I understand the new error system.
Yeah, I think
Is there a
it's
new NIF interface?
Well, like
completely
a BIF, not
not,
sorry, not NIF, not like the OTP NIF, but like there's new BIFs of like it's sort of it's almost like the error node system in C, where like there's this extra data on the side that any language is free to like look at now to make the error message better. But it's
yeah,
like they could actually change it to
add
not be
context.
bad arg, and it's not returning an atom or like a that thing like that, how Beam has magic refs. It's not that. It is like there is a side channel now that you can use to do the better error messages. It doesn't just happen because the whole point was Elixir want to format them in an Elixir style. So Erlang spitting out better error messages means they would have had to do like the log formatter thing, reformatter thing, that or log translator, and that's not what it's doing. It's there's some BIFs you can implement to get the better data out and then format it for your language. And so we would have to emulate both layers of like there is better data and that we, do it to present it in. I guess we have a mode flag to be like, are we Erlang or are we Elixir? Obviously, because we changed this a while ago. We're like we pretend we're Erlang.
The bigger thing is that we support the ability of raising exceptions with that additional payload in it. And then obviously, like, we're not really, at least at this current point, aiming to let people write arbitrary NIFs or whatever with the actual, Erl NIF interface that people are used to using. Sometime down the road, sure, but I think the main thing is, at least in terms of supporting the same kind of AirSim standard library that have been added, we need the ability to, raise that extra payload with the exceptions. And then I think the APIs for that, for accessing that data, are actually written in mostly Erlang with like the BIFs that actually extract that from the trace itself. So that would be pretty easy for us to add, I think.
So you mentioned that it was like a side channel, like no or whatever. Is it like, how does that look like? Is it just a BIF you call to get additional
I think the same built-in functions for raising errors in the actual Ertz runtime or from NIFs now supports passing additional data there.
But how do you get it on the other end?
I haven't looked. I don't know if you pass in the stack. No, wait, I do know this. So it was that the stack trace, it's part of the stack trace. So the stack trace used to only have like it could have the args and it could have the line and file number, and that's just bigger now. And the reason for that, why it's not a breaking change, is no one was supposed to assume it was just that ever.
And right, it explicitly said that this is like implementation dependent info.
There's like a metadata list or something like that, and now you can pass in more stuff there.
Realistically,
that's awesome.
if we think the presentation of errors part is going to come from normal Elixir source, like the part that we would just use their version, we have to exactly mimic the metadata the way that OTP does it, so that the Elixir code just works. It's probably how I'll end up doing it. Of just look what OTP 24 spits out, and then like figure out if it's crucial to like the Elixir code parsing it. Hopefully, it doesn't care that much about the structure, but if it does, it depends on certain keys being there. Obviously, we have to mimic that.
I mean,
the structure is supposed to be fairly generic, so that they don't have to hard code a bunch of special handling for all the different, things that can raise an error.
The best case is that the structure is just treated like implementation dependent by everything, including Elixir, and Elixir just like uses standard library stuff to access it and like access info.
That would be the best case for us. I literally right now don't know like how the arguments are listed. Are they named or are they not? And like that's what I need to mimic, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, so that's kind of probably the biggest user facing one. There's like some of the receive optimizations I'm less concerned about. I don't think they're
We can deal
necessarily
with
something
that.
we need to focus, and they're basically internal changes. So it's not something that, would break user code at all. It would just perform worse in some scenarios. Really depends on the, usage pattern and how big the mailbox for processes and things like that. The
We can
JIT
deal with that
changes are
when we get to
obviously
the point
irrelevant.
where it makes
Yeah,
sense to deal with it.
exactly. And oh shit, the other one. There's one other thing I thought. Fuck. 1 second. Can't believe I already forgot this.
Was it 24 specific, or just stuff since the last version we were targeting?
Stuff since the last time we really talked about kind of baseline, and obviously OTP 24 is the biggest release.
I mean, it's not persistent term, is it? Because we have discussed that before. That will support if it's needed.
Yeah, that's true. Persistent term and the atomics APIs were the two other ones that are, we would need to support eventually. But I think because they're relatively new and probably not super widespread usage yet, we can punt on those. The biggest thing really is ads. So kind of what I wanted to talk about is, I don't know what the availability is that you all have, but I think getting an implementation of ads in some form in the runtime is pretty critical. Otherwise, can't really do much of anything useful. Is that something that one or both of you feel like tackling? Will you have time to do that? We just don't want to enable us to have some parallel streams of work going on as much as possible.
I'm on client work on the 24th, and until then, I'm working on IntelliJ Elixir stuff.
Yeah, I'm on client work at least like out this month, but then after I'm a bit unsure what'll happen. So I mean, I can see what my status is then.
And we had community interest on ETS already when we posted I forget if it was an issue or discussion. Someone talked about it already.
I guess I need to go review that thread. And
there was a question of whether using the Rust ETS implementation would work or not, and I haven't looked at if the if it's generic enough to work with our terms or not.
Is there a Rust ETS implementation?
I guess there must be since they asked.
Is that
definitely
like
wasn't the last time
like...
I checked.
Yeah, I guess the question is that proper ETS, or is it like something ETS like?
I am not aware of any ETS implementation in Rust unless it's something super new.
I mean, I would think the big test case for like, is it more than what someone would think ETS is can you do like can you do X-rated where like the cool code where like it automatically moves the buckets for you and sends it all to the ETS process and just like it just works? Like that's a good test case for is this really ETS or not? Because that's like very concurrent and very much like a very weird thing that ETS can do that most other stores couldn't.
It seems to me like, I'm not finding anything that even mentions ETS in the crates list. Searching just for Erlang, as well as ETS, neither one really returns anything useful here. So unless I can pop into that thread and at least be like, what are you referring to? Maybe they were just wondering if there was an implementation, not referring to one that they know of. But that was definitely something I spent a lot of time digging through, cargo crates for. Is there an ETS implementation? If not, is there like a in-memory data store implementation that is like ETS, or at least close enough that we can make it, work the way we need it to work. But
Do you
there isn't
think?
really anything like that.
I guess dash map won't work because we can have multiple keys. But like since dash map has like the subset of keys automatically, I'm just wondering how bad an implementation on that will work as opposed to having to do the way the ETS data structure actually works. It's like a first pass.
Say that again. Based on what?
Dash map, remember, because like we switched to dash map
right.
from hash map because it had smaller locks and like the exterior view is not locked, which feels more Etsy.
We could probably go with something like that for like an initial pass at least, if there's no interest in doing the proper implementation immediately, and then we'll see like how bad it is.
Plus, since we're shipping dash map already, like we'll have a little bit of code savings that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can certainly like paper over the lack of ETS with an implementation based on that. There might be some issues with making that work, but maybe not. I don't know. I haven't gotten far enough into that to map out what some of the problems might be. Performance-wise, it would definitely not do as well. But for anything that's, not highly contentious, it probably works just fine. I think a lot of the engineering that went into ETS is making, searching it, traversing it for terms optimal as can be, and also, supporting locking currency on the tables without it, having a large kind of cliff in terms of performance.
Where does ETS store its terms? Does it have like a heap per like?
It has its own. I mean, basically, there's a bunch of different allocators in ERTS, and one of the allocators is specific to ETS tables.
But like, do they have like
table
several
has its
entries
own.
in? Oh, it has one per, and they do garbage collection on the whole. ETS.
Say multiple entries. Do you mean like multiple regions of memory allocated for a single table, or?
Oh, I mean like say one key value pair in the ETS table, like where are those terms actually allocated? Like how
those are allocated in the ETS allocator.
But is there like one heap fragment or whatever per one of those, or are they like
multiple I see.
in one
I think it's a region allocator, and it just allocates like a super carrier for the table. And then if it needs to reallocate, it does that. Okay. I haven't dug into the code in a while, so I don't remember how it does sizing and things like that. But I'm pretty confident it's not doing like fragments for every key or value or key value pair or anything like that, because that would be really badly performing. They try and basically make it as much of a region allocator as possible because it makes allocating into it and freeing it super cheap. But I'm not sure what the default size is that allocates for a table and things like that. I'm guessing it's a single super carrier, which is, like I think 4 megabytes in ERTS, something like that. It's dependent on the page size and things like that. But I mean, for our purposes, we can ignore all that, or I mean, we do have some allocators written that do more of the ERTS type allocation scheme, so we could use one of those as well. But at least for our first pass, it's not necessary to do that so much. And we can allocate heap fragments for keys and values and associate those with the actual map key and values in like dash map or whatever we're using as the underlying implementation. It probably would have to be dash map just because that one is already written to be send and sync, and I don't think anything else that we use would work as cleanly.
No, like a normal hash map with a lock on the outside isn't going to even feel the way ETS does, like because it'll be fully blocking, and that would it's going to feel too different. Yeah. I'm hoping that the dash map, I don't know what it calls it, like section or region size is small enough that you normally won't see a performance difference, and so it'll work good enough. But
I think the biggest area where there is going to be performance issues around that, like versus like the Erlang implementation, is going to be around writes. Reads will probably be, performant enough. I don't know in terms of like traversing a table from beginning to end, like whether that would be adversely impacted, but certainly for inserts, there would be a big performance cliff there because
I would say that the biggest thing would be that like the optimized for reader write concurrency would be like a lie. Like we wouldn't actually be changing anything when that happens. So
right,
people
yeah.
are tuning it for that. Like it's not going to do anything.
But those values don't really promise any particular guarantees anyways. It's more expressing the intent of what the table is being used for so that the runtime can optimize for those patterns. But there are no guarantees. They're like, if you specify read concurrency, we won't do X. It's just like, if you tell us that your, usage pattern is highly concurrent on reads, we change kind of how the implementation works to optimize for that pattern. So I think it's safe and not an issue for us to not do anything special when those options are provided, at least initially. Obviously, in an ideal case, we can, respect those options the way they're intended to be respected, but I don't think any of that is relevant. The biggest issue from my perspective is that virtually all, Erlang Elixir code of any consequence uses ETS, and without it, we can't really do much of anything useful. Even the standard library uses all over the place. So the other thing I'm uncertain about with dash map, I guess we'd have to experiment with it, see how it goes. It's like if you want to create a bunch of tables, let's say like 1,000 tables, what is the overhead of each table having its own map? Might not matter, I don't know. But since neither one of you will probably have time to look at that for at least, a month, I guess, or rest of this month anyways.
My client thing is only a
talk about it
4-week engagement, so.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, what I'd say is let's revisit it when one of you free up, and we can make that kind of our next area of focus. I'll go back and look at that thread and see if there's any questions that need to be answered. Like if we can get somebody from the community contributing it, like great, that's cool. But there will be some like onboarding time required there. So if nobody's kind of available to mentor that implementation, I don't know how far somebody can get without at least one of us kind of getting somebody ramped up on how to write stuff for our runtime. Really depends on their skill level respectively with Rust. If they're somebody that's very familiar, they can probably figure it out on their own. But other than that, I'm in the same boat as you, basically. Basically working all day, every day on work stuff. I barely have time to work on Lumen right now, but I am squeezing in an hour here or there to get things moving. I'd say I have about 40 hours total left to get everything cleaned up. So that's where things sit right now. Brian was spitballing, trying to, you have Dockyard compensate me for like a week or something to just take a week off of work for my regular job unpaid and work on Lumen for a week with Dockyard paying for it. But I don't know if I'll swing that. It's a difficult conversation to have with your employer. Hey, will you let me take off for a week and go work for somebody else?
Yeah, I've contemplated that before. If I ever got a big like corporate sponsor for IntelliJ Elixir, if I would be like, I'm going to burn my vacation but get paid extra by someone else, like.
Right. Yeah, it's an option, but it's definitely skating awfully close to moonlighting, which can definitely be problematic with some employers. So I think, I'll probably talk to my boss and just be like, hey, you already know about this project. Like, we're kind of in a time crunch. Is there any way I can swing some time to spend on this? But whether or not that's going to work is dependent on a lot of things out of my control. So I don't know how that'll go. But if I do get that, then I might be able to burn through the last bit pretty quickly. Just spending a week straight, just blowing through it.
Let's hope at least that you get some more people over there soon. That can hopefully be a bit stressful.
Right now, kind of what I'm trying to prioritize is getting things to a point where, we can split up remaining cogen work across more than just myself, so that we can continue to make more progress. Even if we're all fairly absorbed with our day jobs, we can still have some parallel streams of work. The big thing there is moving a lot of the old cogen into Rust, which is already largely done, but nevertheless, that's where some of the work still remains, so that all that stuff is more consolidated and a lot easier to work with. Because the C++ infrastructure is a real pain in the ass because of how frequently it changes right now. Luckily, because they added a bunch of C APIs, the bindings are a lot more stable. So with the consuming things through the bindings means that we don't really have to feel the pain of those changes nearly as much. But yeah, anyways, that's all I have. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I'm just responding to someone asking some questions on the work Slack.
Nothing from me to report except for that thread about what happened in the stack group that both you and me missed, Paul.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you read it. I guess I'll summarize for the video. So the one we missed, I think it was Ross Tate presenting. He went over like the plan for how to write an actual spec for stats switching. It appears they're going with async and await first. The impression I get, since the way that Francis talked about it, was like it is a very big priority for Google to get to be able to port their async and await code from JavaScript into WASM. So they're going to do that first, and also because both Ross Tate and Luke Wagner both came up with like JavaScript APIs to like just make it work. Like it'll just work, that they can return promises and like so you can async await stuff from WASM, but it won't mean that we'll have like the actual like suspend and cont stuff yet. That would be round 2. Francis right at the beginning says that that is still happening. It's just the async and await thing's going to go first, so it's going to be 2-phase.
Hey, I'm
curious how that's going to go ahead.
I'll need to run because I'm getting picked up for something. So
okay.
Yeah.
And then like this already incorporates the stacklet stuff, so like they're already using the language that they're going to use when the WASM like language changes happen. So it's,
when they refer to stacklet, are they talking about something that can be created and manipulated, or is it implicit?
You can pass a pre-existing one in, but I couldn't tell from the slides what the API was for creating one. So I think they mean for it. There was discussion about like should JavaScript be able to create a stacklet or not. I think it's mostly there for later, maybe.
I think the biggest obstacle for us, I guess, is if we can't.
The stacklet is very much like a stack fragment in the like research papers, it seems. Right. But I think they're using stacklet because they don't want to require it that it is a stack fragment, because a lot of different runtimes use stack fragment differently. And so that might be why. And there's also the caveat that the way the async API works is that like, and because of, remember Francis' like huge thing about like JavaScript cannot be accidentally get stuck in a stack frame somewhere, which was the big blocking thing, is that at least for the async await, it'll be spelled out that like, if you call back into JavaScript, you are the WASM one is like whatever async await JavaScript currently does to like suspend back to the main thread. That's how that works. Like kind of like do the same thing from like the micro events thing in the main thread, and then the JavaScript code runs on the main thread again. So it's very promisey. But at the same time, in the talk before that, which I think you were there, like I don't actually see how the stack switching has to work any differently than looking like a promise from outside of WASM anyways. And other people seem to agree with that. So
Yeah.
I think the setup is fine the way they're doing it, but obviously we don't get stack switching yet.
Yeah, that'll be a bit tricky. It's unclear to me whether or not we'll be able to
I haven't really thought
advantage.
about it of, obviously we would have to generate async await code that can use async and await import. So like the new thing is that there's going to be async imports and sync imports. So like, you know, whether it's an async or await thing from JavaScript, like it's not, you don't have to like, you don't have to do reflection to figure out like, is this an async API when you're in WASM? Like it'll just know from the imports being different arguments or something from the JavaScript API. So in theory, we could do the same thing that Heejin was doing for like exceptions, where like we would use async JavaScript functions to like suspend us and pop back through, and we would just have to generate enough code to do however they expect the async await API to work. That would be an option, I would guess. And that would allow us to yield back to our request animation frame and then resume and work with the async await when we can't get real stack switching from inside. It does mean we couldn't run more than one process in a given frame, which is probably going to suck.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically what we would be forced to do on WebAssembly, at least initially, with the level of support we're talking here, is try and compile everything into futures, i.e. async await.
Yeah.
And yeah, then essentially everything is single threaded in that world, which is more or less true of how processes work if we only have one scheduler thread anyways.
Yeah.
It's just kind of the semantics of how the interleaving happens is different. And obviously each process then would no longer have its own independent stack. You know, they're all woven together on the main stack.
Oh, wait. Actually, I'm wrong. I shouldn't say that it would only be one per frame. As long as we move the should I keep running thing out of WASM and into like the JavaScript shim, you know, to do the check of like, oh, should I be done doing work for the frame? We could always just resume the promise we just got and shoot back into WASM whenever we want to switch processes. That would still work. Be a little bit weird, but it would
Right,
work.
yeah. We can probably have a little bit more control over when we yield, yeah. But I wonder in terms of, you know, just overall complexity, if it's worth us trying to, you know, have control over the scheduling too much, and more just rely on kind of like a regular futures executor for WASM.
Yeah. I think the futures executor inside, like actually written in JavaScript, might work for this level of the async await they're doing. I think. It was unclear from the API. I don't think it's possible to do like I don't know if it's possible with the given, like if we imported promise all, or like, you know, promise any, or, you know, any of the things that like take an iterable of promises and like run them all at once. I don't know if that would just work under the proposed API. That wasn't clear since I wasn't, you know, there to watch it from the slides in the talk. But like that's a potential way to still be able to write the scheduler in WASM and not have to write a bigger shim. But I mean, we're gonna have to shim anyway since Rust still needs a shim, so it probably doesn't matter that much.
My assumption would be that there would be WASM primitives for async and await, would there not?
No, that's the point. From what I got from this presentation is there's a JavaScript API, and the WASM can return promise-like things, but there seems to be no language changes under the first phase.
So how does the WASM code like return a promise?
Yeah, I couldn't understand that. Like I didn't know
like if it can't create them, you know.
I don't know if it's purely like they are manually constructing it all. You know, like you're getting a promise new that takes a function, and you're shoving in enough, like sort of like the executor struct we had for the Rust version. I don't know if that's what they're doing. That wasn't clear to me. But like the way they're thinking about it, like this is enough to get them async and await without WASM changes, they said. So it seems to be like they think they can make this work with normal JavaScript APIs. So it must be that.
It's so bizarre that they wouldn't involve anything at the WASM level, because how are any of the other runtimes going to try and stay parallel with the browser engines? Like, how are they going to support async and await, for example, if there's no WASM level async and await? Like, there has to be at least semantics associated with this, right? Like, how is the WebAssembly spec not changing in this world? Otherwise, it seems like it's completely separate from the WebAssembly stacks discussion at all, right? Because if there's no WASM spec changes of any kind, then for the purposes of the stack subgroup, like, we're not talking about something that's real. Like, it's totally isolated just to the browsers. There might have been some more context in the discussion that
I mean, the stack group like is kind of notorious for having horrible notes. So yeah. I'm sure there's stuff missing.
Luckily, when there's like slides or something like that, those are usually pretty useful. I've been able to go back and look at those with pretty good success. But yeah, anything conversation based is usually lost in the wind.
The funny part about it is after that was posted, there's like a huge comment from Ross of like Luke pointed out that like Ross proposed this different thing and it's pretty much just Luke's API. Like it's the same thing, but slightly different because know Ross thinks differently about everything. And it turns out like there's probably no difference between their APIs even.
Yeah, that's kind of what I would expect. That's how a lot of those conversations go. Shit. Yeah, I guess it's hard for us to really do much useful with that. I guess the next meeting we have, I'll have to try and dig up more information about how we're supposed to like treat this from a compiler perspective. I don't think
assume that I'm just misunderstanding it from only being able to read the slides and the bad notes. So hopefully it'll be spelled out better.
My assumption would be that they would, at the very least, want to either specify semantics in the spec, or ideally they would add primitives for async and await to WASM, and then the JavaScript APIs can build on those, right? Because if the point is that they want to be able to push this stuff down into the WASM engine in the browsers, then having WASM level async and await would permit that. But if the problem is that they can't do that yet, but they can make it work in at least in browsers by doing all this implementation in the JavaScript engine, then yeah, it may be that nothing changes for us in the near term. Browsers are suddenly allowed to do async and await interop with WASM modules. The thing that boggles my mind is I don't think that that's not possible today. You know what I mean? Like, I'm pretty sure.
So I just double checked the like after the title slide for Ross's thing, it says 2-prong JS API for async await, no change to WASM, only change to JS API. So yeah, I wasn't misremembering it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so fucking weird. I don't know how that works. It doesn't matter for now. We got our stuff to wrap up, so we'll just focus on getting that done, and then by the time the next subgroup meeting happens, maybe we can ask for more clarification. I was too busy that day, so I couldn't make the call, but I wish I had, because I definitely would have had some questions, but it is what it is. All right, man. I got to run, but we'll talk again soon.
Okay. Bye.
Take care.